We're going to talk about cyber insurance and what is surplus lines. If you're a business owner and you've purchased cyber insurance or any insurance and you've been told it's a surplus lines policy or an excess and surplus lines policy or E&S policy, you might be wondering what that means. And in the insurance business, we're looking at some data that says surplus lines policies have gone from 25% of the sector to 60%. So that's a big jump. That's more than double. And you want to know maybe why that is. We're also going to talk about retirement. And the trick question is, what if you have $3 million? Are you going to struggle in retirement? So if you have a number that's higher or lower than that, you might want to listen in and see how that number fits into retirement plan. So first, we're going to talk about excess and surplus lines insurance and cyber insurance. There's an article that came out from Property and Casualty 360, which is a great source of industry events and information for the insurance industry. And surplus lines insurers are now the dominant players in cyber. So up until 2020, surplus lines sector held 25% market share. Now it's over 60%, right? And cyber insurance pushes towards a potential end to its hard market. What that means is up until recently, getting cyber insurance is not easy. The insurers are very selective, very picky about who they insure and making sure that your business is properly protected. Surplus lines insurers are emerging with a proportion of the marketplace. They account for 60%. What is surplus lines? Let's start with that. Well, in every state, insurers, the insurance companies, and for business insurance, you may have heard of Chubb and Travelers and companies along those lines. They have to file their rates and their policies with the insurance commission in the state. So every state that the insurance company wants to be licensed to sell policies, they have to file their policy with the terms and conditions, and they have to file their rates in order to get approved. Now, for things like auto and homeowners and standard business policies like a BOP or business owner's policy or a CPP, commercial package policy, it's pretty straightforward, right? The terms and conditions are going to be the same from state to state. Maybe they make a few adjustments for every state's rules, and the rates are commensurate with what the risks are. And the insurance commissioner is going to look at it and say, yeah, this is reasonable. This coverage is fair. The rates are fair. You're approved. Now that is a admitted carrier with a filed policy, right? So now you go to your insurance agent, which is different than the company, and you say, hey, I want to buy commercial insurance for my barbecue store or barbecue stand. Okay. You go there, they take your information about your company. What are your revenues? How many employees? How many square feet is your building? And they come up with a rate for your particular risk. They put together a proposal. If you accept it, it's a bound policy. You get a binder, and then you get the policy following that to cover your business. Great. These policies have been filed with the state long time before that. What if you're asking for a type of coverage that's not standard? Maybe you want to cover some rare thing. You have a unique antique artifact in your barbecue restaurant that's hanging on the wall. Maybe it's an old tractor that's worth $50,000 that you want to cover separately. Well, since that's a unique, one-of-a-kind type risk to cover, there may not be a filed policy in your state that covers 1947 tractors because it's not common enough for the company to do it. So your agent or your broker will first contact all the admitted carriers, the ones that are in the state that are admitted, and say, look, do you have any policies that cover this type of risk? No, we don't have anything that's off the rack, off the shelf. Okay. Then they're going to start looking at excess and surplus lines. These are companies that maybe are in your state or maybe they're out of the state that can write customized coverage for things that aren't standard. First, they have to make reasonably due diligent efforts to find an admitted carrier. And then if they don't, they can write an excess and surplus lines policy for your business. When they write it, It'll be very specific, very custom. The state also charges a fee. It's an E&S tax for every policy that's written, because policies that are written under filed admitted carriers have built-in protection. If that carrier goes out of business or if they default, then there's money in backup accounts from the state to cover the difference. E&S policies don't have that, so there's taxes that go to help offset any potential insolvencies. So now they wrote your policy for that antique tractor, and you're in good shape. Why is cyber insurance more likely, 60% of the time, to be an E&S or excess and surplus lines policy? Well, the reason is because the risk is changing so fast, it's almost impossible for an insurance company to have standard off-the-shelf policies pre-written for cyber insurance, because what they cover, what they exclude, what they accept, what you can add for endorsements, that may change from month to month. These hackers are coming out with new ways of attacking businesses every week, every month. So the insurance companies are changing their policy language, maybe not every month, but a few times a year. Well, admitted carriers have to file their policies for the insurance commissioner to review once a year. If the risk is changing every year, it's almost impossible to do that because it costs money and you have to have it reviewed by attorneys. So for that reason, most of the cyber carriers are just going as E&S policies, because in most states, there are no large volumes of available options for cyber insurance. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's good that you have this coverage. It's good that you have options. It would be better if there were admitted carriers who file policies, but the ones who do have standardized policies in some states, they're very narrowly written, and they may not cover a lot of things. They may have a lot of exclusions of coverage. They may have a lot of requirements, where some of the E&S policies may be more broad. More than anything else, you may actually, in most cases, find better pricing. Sometimes E&S policies cost more than a standard policy. With cyber, we're seeing sometimes it's less, because now you can look at options from other states, right? More competition. The cyber insurance risk coverage industry, by now you would think would be settled down. It's been around for 5 or 6 years, a little bit longer, but really in any kind of volume, 5 or 6 years. But because the risk is changing so fast, none of the carriers, it's like hitting a moving target. If the risk had stayed the same, there would be enough carriers that are stabilized that would have admitted policies in all 50 states, no problem. But because the risk is changing so fast, and some of the early carriers got burned, they covered risk and they have to pay out claims for stuff that was not expected, right? Their guess, their speculative estimate on what the claims cost was going to be was low. So now they're hammered with claims. So that wiped out a lot of the early players. Or even if the company didn't go out of business, they backed off of those kind of policies. Now you have a situation where there's some new players, a lot of these insurtech companies that are using technology. The better companies now aren't just selling you insurance. They're actually involving themselves with your technology. They're kind of like your silent partner for cyber protection. In addition to getting a policy, they're installing some apps on your computers, maybe on your routers, on your servers, to kind of keep track of, are there any intrusions? So they're there all the time. They ping the servers maybe 5 or 6 times a day, some of these carriers, which is good, because in addition to having coverage, if something goes wrong, they're trying to prevent something going wrong in the first place. So some of these newer companies have that capacity, that expertise, that capability, where old school, traditional, legacy type insurance companies, sure, they're going to help you prevent risk in your business from fire or slip and fall. They're going to tell you, make sure you mop the floor, if something spills, but they're not going to be looking at your business every day to see what the risks are. The cyber carriers are doing more of that, because the risk is changing every day. These hackers are upping their game. We talked about it yesterday. They're upping their game all the time. Every day they come out with a new way to hack computers, and having a um, having a partner that is aware of those threats, because they're seeing the losses from their other clients that they have to pay claims for, and they're seeing the attacks that come into other insureds that they prevented. If you, even with a full-time cyber protection IT person, if you had one, most medium to small companies don't have a dedicated person. Even if you had one, they would only be seeing the attacks that come to your one single company. They wouldn't be seeing the attacks that come to other companies. A cyber insurance carrier can see the attacks across the board and help. You kind of learn from somebody else's mistakes, right? Another company has a loss. It's sad for them and it's a tragedy for them, but you benefit from that because now the experience from that loss you can put into prevention in your company. So surplus lines, as you see on the screen, is a legitimate type of insurance. Just make sure that if you are getting a surplus lines policy, that you ask your agent, were there any other filed admitted carriers available? Because if there was, you want to take a look at those. In most states, you have to look at that first. So your agent probably already checked that out before they even offered you a surplus lines policy, right? Or maybe they offer both at the same time. But you want to make sure that you're aware of all the policies that they have to offer, or even other agents may have to offer. Next up, we're going to talk about retirement. If you're a business owner or an executive, or even a regular consumer, you're probably thinking about retirement, and you may have a 401k, you may have a retirement, IRA account, you may have CDs, you may have other things that are saved up for your retirement years. Big question is, what's the number? How much do you need? Many people underestimate it. We're going to use a number of $3 million as a potential starting point. And you might say, well, that's a lot of money. For some people, it's hardly any money, right? But let's take a look and do the math on what 3 million will turn into for a retirement. And the reason this came up is because you may be familiar with this person. There's a investment consumer type financial advisor named Dave Ramsey. You've probably heard of him, like him or not, whatever your opinion is. He talks a lot about retirement, and he had a video that came out recently called "Is 3 million enough to comfortably retire on?" Now, fair disclosure, I did not watch this video because I don't know what his answer is going to be. But we've talked about retirement before and what numbers are going to be needed. But when this came up, this is a good headline. It's a clickbait headline, $3 million. You can see him and his assistant. They're thinking about listening to the question, is 3 million enough to retire on? So we're going to take a look at it. We're going to use our old friend, which we always do, Google Calculator, calculator.net, right? And we're going to take a look and see how this plays out. So let's start with $3 million, right? There's $3 million. And you have that much saved up. It's in the bank. It's in your 401k. I'm not talking about what's in your house equity, because that's not really liquid. You can't really spend that. We're talking about liquid cash that you can access. Maybe it's a CD that you have to wait for it to mature or whatnot, but we're talking about cash assets, financial assets, equity outside of real estate or vehicles. So you have $3 million. Let's talk about what age you're going to retire. Let's say you're going to retire at age 65, right? A lot of times when somebody has $3 million, they want to retire as soon as possible. You don't want to work until your 70s, right? Many people with $3 million might want to think about retiring at age 60 or 58 or 57. Who wants to keep working, right? Maybe you do. Maybe you like what you're doing, or maybe you like some of the things you're doing. But let's just use, for sake of argument, and we can adjust it up or down, the age of 65 years old to retire. All right, that's one point of the process. What do you think the other point is to do the math? Any guesses? The guess is how long are you going to live? When are you going to die? We're all going to die. If you are going to live to be 85, which is conservative, many people now are living into their late 80s, 90s, right? But let's just say 85 as a round number. That means there's 20 years from the time you retire until the time that you die. Assuming no other income, and we'll get back to that, why this is important, have this other income. Take that $3 million and just divide it up, straight up, divided by 20 years equals $150,000 per year. So on average, if you have $3 million, you live 20 years, you can spend $150,000 per year. And then the day you turn 85, you run out of money, got $0 in the bank. So if you live to 86, 87, 88, you got nothing. So is that enough? Is 150 enough? Well, presumably, if you have $3 million saved up, you probably made more than $150,000 a year. Maybe there was some windfall. Maybe you won the lottery. Maybe you sold a business. Maybe you did something that had a big cash inflow. Maybe a inheritance, right? But even then, presumably you made $150,000 a year, especially in the later years of life, right? From the time you were 60 to 65, you probably made 150. So you're not really going to up your game of lifestyle. If you made 180 or 190, if you start averaging 150, you're actually going to have to cut some corners. You're going to have to actually start tighten up the purse strings a little bit, right? Maybe that's what you want to do. And people think, well, when I retire, I won't spend as much. Yeah, there's some things you won't spend as much money on: dry cleaning, gas to go to the work, eating out, that kind of thing. But there are some things you're going to spend more money on. Presumably, if you retire, now you're going to have more free time. You might want a hobby. You might want to travel more. You might need more money for entertainment type activities. So it's unlikely that net you're going to spend less money. There are some categories that will go down, right? Your daily commute, less money. Maybe some work expenses, less money. But some things are going to go up. The other thing that'll probably happen is if you look back on your life as a working person, you probably moved from one house to another at least a couple times. Maybe you moved for work. Maybe you moved to get a bigger house. Maybe you moved for whatever reason. When you did that, you reset the clock in many cases on home maintenance. You may not have bought a new house. If you bought a new house, the clock starts at 0. If you bought a resale home, the house wasn't brand new, but you probably fixed all the things that needed to get fixed when you bought it, or maybe the seller did. It's a very subtle thing that people overlook a lot. If you're starting that clock from 0 and then moving in 10 years, you never really get to where there's a lot of expensive maintenance or repairs on your house, right? If you retire at 65 and now you're presumably going to stay in the same house, now that clock is just ticking longer. You're going to have to paint the house, put on a roof, maybe a new septic system, maybe new heating and air conditioning. Those are expenses maybe you didn't bake into your personal expense structure for the last 20 years. Now they're going to be in there and you're living on 150. It's over here, right? You're living on 150. Make sure you factor that in. In addition, much as we hate to say it, as we get older, your health care costs are going to go up. Maybe you have a great health policy from your work and your retirement. Maybe you're a government employee that has, good coverage. Maybe you have a pension that includes health care. Maybe you're going to buy health care. Maybe you're going to do Medicaid, Medicare. The problem is, regardless, your out-of-pocket costs are still going to go up. Deductibles, things that aren't covered, still going to go up. Remember, you got to fit that into the 150 also. Another cost that will go up is if you have children or parents, they're both going to start needing more money. Your parents, as they get older, are going to need more, even if it's not direct payment to them, travel to them, taking care of them, purchasing maybe things to help them out. Your children, as they get older, kind of get married, have kids, you're going to spend more money on them than you did before as they were young adults, right? Those expenses are going to go up. Is 3 million enough? I don't know. 150. How does that compare with the income you made in the last years of your working life? Is it more? Is it less? Is it the same? 3 million sounds like a lot. In addition, you're also going to have inflation. What, and this is, hard to figure out, and it's not like we're beating a dead horse or telling you something you don't know. What cost went into your personal expenses in 2023, 2022, 2020 are going to be more in 25, 26, 2030, 2040, right? So the 150 may not go as far, may be equivalent to 100. That's why a lot of people that are retired for the first 5 or 6 or 7 years, it all sounds good. But how many people do you know that are older, maybe in their mid to late 70s, maybe 80, maybe they're very comfortable, maybe almost wealthy when they're retired, and now they're talking about fixed income, retired, budget, right? How many times do you see that? Cutting coupons. It's something to where whatever you think that you want to have for retirement, you want to try to have more, because the expenses aren't going to be any less and there'll be more surprises. So what do you do about that? Well, if you only have this 3 million saved up, you can't save up anymore. You can't magically make money appear. If we could, then none of us would be here. We'd all just be making money appear out of nowhere. The trick is, the magic is to have additional income created. Now, how do you do that? Well, one of the things that you want to do, maybe a few years before your retirement, hopefully 5 or 6 years, is to start creating and generating a secondary source of income. What do we mean by that? Well, the young people now, this day and age, the cool kids, they call it side hustle. We used to call it side job, moonlighting, whatever you want to call it. Now it's called side hustle. Well, what does that mean? Well, side hustle is simply something where you do some work in your spare time, outside of your work, outside of your primary employment, that makes money. Some people do little woodworking projects that they sell on Etsy. Some people do consulting projects. Some people resell things that they buy surplus, wholesale. There's a million different side hustle things you can do. Some people do marketing and advertising for their business. The key is starting this early. It may take 3 or 4 or 5 or more years to get this side hustle built up to where it's creating income, creating revenue, right? Because the first thing you try may not work. The second thing you try may not work. The 10th thing you try may not work. You might have to keep adjusting it and find that it's not as easy as it looks. But if you spend the time doing that, maybe starting in your mid to late 50s, if you're going to retire at 65, and then get to the point where you retire, you already have something that maybe at that point is, maybe if it's only generating $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month, it's not a ton of money. You're not getting rich off it. You're not going to become a millionaire off it. But what does that do? That $3 million, let's go back to the calculator, right? That we said is going to last you 20 years. Now, if you add on $1,200 a month, right? $1,200 a month times 12 months in a year, that's $14,000 a year. Times 5 years, let's say even, that's $72,000. Well, that adds an extra 6 months to how long your money's going to last after 5 years. After 10 years, 2 times that, it adds 144. After 10 years, you added another year. More than likely, something else is going to happen. Once you start working on this side hustle full time, because you're not working your primary job, you'll probably start making more income than $1,000 a month, because you just scratch that together in your spare time. Once you get to where that's all you have to do during the day and that's your primary focus, it'll probably grow faster. So maybe now you make $2,000 a month. Well, in 10 years, now you added 3 more years to being able to run out of money, right? You're probably not going to be able to live by itself on the money from that side gigs, that side hustle, but at least it keeps moving the goalpost farther before you run out of cash. It's kind of like if you're driving down the road and your gas tank is going down. If you have like a refueling truck that's always filling your tank while you're driving, that's what side hustle is about. Again, if you try to start it the day you retire, it's going to be a problem because, first of all, it would take 3 or 4 or 5 years to get it to turn into anything. So you're going to be behind the gun to begin with. Here's the other problem. If you start it after you retire, when you retire, you're going to get demoralized. You're going to get fear and scared that it's not going to work because the first 1 year or 2 or 5 years, you work out it full time, it doesn't make any money. You're going to start to develop fear and anxiety, and that's going to defeat your motivation to do it. If you start it early, 5 or 10 years before you retire, gives you plenty of time to work out the kinks, to get used to it, to find what you really like, to find things that people want to buy from you. And then you can turn it into something that augments, not replaces, but augments what you have saved up for retirement. It's a very crucial way to make sure that your nest egg is not going to be used up before your last breath comes. So we're going to take a quick break. We come back. We're going to talk about investigations and maybe electric vehicles and answer a question that one of our viewers asked the other day.
Are you tired of automated systems and chatbots when you need assistance? Experience actualhuman.com and connect with real professionals, not automation. At actualhuman.com, we bring you a network of professionals who are excited to answer your questions and provide guidance. Getting started is easy. Let us show you how. Here's how it works. Step 1. Select the best date and time for your video call. Step 2. Describe your situation and the areas you're looking for advice. Step 3. Connect one-on-one with an expert and get the undivided attention that you deserve. Experience the difference. Visit actualhuman.com today and schedule your professional consultation. Actualhuman.com. Expert guidance from real people.
Good. So we're back. And the next thing we're going to talk about is a very troubling scenario that comes up. We're getting a lot of calls on our investigative side from people who are relatives of a deceased person, maybe an heir, maybe a son or daughter of somebody who's died. And there's a process of probate where their assets are being distributed, their real estate, their bank accounts, their vehicles. And they're just a little bit suspicious. They're like, I thought that Grandpa Joe had an apartment building in the next town, but it's not in the will or it's not in the probate. I thought Grandpa Joe had more money than this. No, we're not seeing it. I thought there was an old car in the barn that this person had and nobody's talking about it. Where did it go? Well, once we do a little bit of investigation, we find that there were these assets and somebody has concealed them or removed them. Sometimes it's the executor of the estate, which in many cases is a relative. Sometimes it's one of the other relatives that just snatched it out before it even went to the executor, the case. And it doesn't take a lot. I mean, if you're an heir, maybe there's 4 people that are going to get money from an inheritance. When somebody dies, there's 4 people that it's distributed equally, let's say. And there's something that's worth $100,000. Maybe it's a cabin in the woods. Maybe it's a antique vehicle. Maybe it's a bank account or a CD. Well, if you're one of 4, you're going to get $25,000. That's it. If you somehow can extract that asset for your own benefit and don't throw it into the pot to be chopped up, now you get $100,000. So you just gained $75,000 to the good, right? And here's the problem. It's easy to do because some of the family members may know more about the finances and the intimate workings of the deceased person than others. Maybe they live closer. Maybe they spend more time with them. And many times the other people don't know about it. Here's the other problem. The fact that assets have appreciated as much as they have, real estate has gone up, CDs have gone up, 401ks have gone up. It's easy to find something that's worth 100 grand. Look, 15 years ago, something that was worth 100 grand was a lot of money. It was a rare thing. It wasn't a lot of $100,000 items just laying around. Now, $100,000 is kind of almost a drop in the bucket for an estate. So if one person says, well, if I snatch this item, pull it to the side, I can get a quick, easy 75,000 extra. How do they do it? Well, they take the property and they quit claim the deed to somebody else's name. They take a vehicle and they move it and they sell it on Craigslist. Maybe they take a bank account and close it and cash out the money in a cashier's check before there's an asset search. And by doing that, they benefit themselves, sure, but they also do two other things that are very tragic. One is they improperly shortchange the other people that were entitled to that asset. But it's worse than that. That's not the worst thing. Look, if you rip off or shortchange a stranger, that's bad enough, and it's bad karma, and it's not the right thing to do. But in this case, you're actually defrauding people that are close to you. They're relatives, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, whoever. And most of the people do it without hatred for the other person. They just figure they'll never find out. They may still represent their friends with them. There's no bad blood between the relatives. There's no like animosity. It's just that they're friends with them. They're pretending they're friends with them, and they stab them in the back and they take the asset. The third thing that it does is it dishonors the wishes of the deceased person. That person wanted the money to be distributed equally, and now you're dishonoring that by stabbing them in the back too. So probate fraud is a big deal. In fact, over the last couple years, we've talked about it before, the vast majority of the increase in contacts to our agency have come from probate fraud. People who are trying to divert money from a deceased person's estate. Very, very troubling development. So what do you do about it? If you are a family member and there's a person in your family that is either deceased or probably will become deceased soon, maybe they're in hospice, maybe they're in nursing home, you want to start early in identifying the asset census. You want to find out what all the assets are of that estate early on. That way you can see if any of them have been moved around or they do get moved around. In addition, you want to be very conspicuous with the other people in the estate, in the executor, letting them know that you're on top of it. You're going to be looking at things. You want copies of documents. You want to know about life insurance policies. You want to know about, the different assets that may have been recently owned, right? You can say, did Grandpa Joe sell anything recently? And that's going to make them get scared. If they diverted an asset, they may have sold it 2 months ago thinking that they're off the hook and it's going to be a secret. I want to look at what they sold recently, not necessarily accusing anybody, but we want to make sure that we know about all the assets. Is there still money owed? Is there money supposed to be coming in from the buyer? In addition, you may want to do this diplomatically and sensitively, but you may want to hire your own attorney to represent you in the probate case. That attorney can now make sure that they're observing all the activities of the executor, who sometimes is an attorney, and of the other parties. Again, you have to use your own judgment, how you want to do that with diplomacy. You don't want to create bad blood between a relative by accusing them, but you also want to make sure that things are done properly. So if you are a party who is closely related or close somehow to somebody who's deceased recently, you want to make sure that you get a good handle on where the assets are and are they being distributed and properly dispersed to whoever's supposed to get them, whether it's you or somebody else. So thanks again for watching another episode of Describe TV. Visit our website, Describe TV. Also, don't forget at actualhuman.com, we have access to live consultations with licensed or certified experts in many fields. Insurance, we talked about, investigations, real estate, mortgages, accounting, sales, business development. And if you need to reach somebody in one of those industries, remember, it's very difficult to get people on the phone anymore to talk to a real person. It's sometimes voicemail, text message, chat. Everybody's using AI, artificial intelligence, chatbots. And for some people, that's not really appealing. And you want to talk to an actual human. See you on the next episode. And let us know in the comments what questions we can answer.